Hello everyone, welcome to the first video in this series called Books You've Never Heard of, where I review books that you've never heard of. And today we're starting off with The Island of Last Things, written by Emma Sloley. I just remember I have something in the oven and I didn't set a timer. I'm sure it's fine. This book was published August 12, 2025, so it's a relatively new release. It is 272 pages long in the hardcover. So The Island of Last Things follows two zookeepers at the last zoo in the world. And unfortunately not in, oh my god, we have finally stopped abusing and imprisoning depressed animals for monetary gain kind of way, but in a, there are no more than one zoo's worth of animals left alive on this planet. Climate crisis has gotten to a point where all animals are dead. So needless to say, it isn't exactly a fun time that our characters are having. The zoo was established on Alcatraz Island. Yes, that is the prison island in is it California? Yeah, it is. In California. And you could say that is a bit on the nose, but I think that's pretty funny. Okay, so as I said, we follow two of the zookeepers. We follow Camille, who's been working in the zoo for a couple of years now. And we also follow Sailor. Sailor is just moving from Paris Zoo, which still exists at the beginning of the book but doesn't by the end. Long story. She moves from Paris Zoo back to the United States, where she's originally from, and they kind of strike up an unlikely friendship that is a bit of a driving factor in this book. And it's just about kind of their daily lives, living and caring with and for these animals, while also being constantly confronted by the fact that animals are one of the most valuable commodities left on our planet. We have a lot of kind of backstory about smugglers and underground markets for animals. It's quite a grim scenario that these characters are in. And yeah, from there on out, we just follow them, taking care of the animals, dreaming of a place and a life where animals roam free again, where nature isn't fucked beyond repair. And Sailor, the one who came from Paris Zoo, is kind of scheming to maybe make that a reality. Okay, so let's now get into my review of the book. First of all, I'm gonna say the setting of this was very vivid, absolutely so well done. It isn't really explained how exactly the world got into this state, but it is so late stage capitalist. It reads like just a couple of years into the future, so it isn't crazy or completely unimaginable that our world would turn into this. So I didn't feel like I needed any further explanation, and the settings are very vivid. For example, the author constantly describes that like on the horizon you can kind of see constant waste fires, you know, the kind of chemical fires that just you can't put out, and they're constantly burning. You just always have them in the background of this book. And there's also the fact that like the characters describe not being able to go out, and when the two protagonists kind of start going on walks more, they have to constantly wear masks. It's described multiple times that they're just not able to go out. There's constantly people like collapsing, not being able to breathe, that kind of stuff. And it is not done incredibly creatively in my opinion, but I do think it is well implemented, and it is implemented in such a way that it doesn't seem unnatural. Like it isn't like the author just needed to point out that this really is a bad place right now. It makes sense for these scenes to exist within the story. And then we come kind of to my personal biggest issue with this book, which was the pacing. And to be honest, I still cannot quite pinpoint whether I'm the problem or this book, because I did feel quite reading slumpy, but I just remember every time I picked it up, it was like, oh my god, I can't believe we're still doing this. I can't believe nothing has happened. I feel like we're constantly going over the same things over and over and over again. And the book is told from the future. So Camille, one of the two zookeepers, she's telling the story to us as the reader. And it is not specifically stated, but it is kind of implied that she has already experienced all of this. We just don't know what it is. So there's nothing happening in the past timeline, but there's also not enough. We don't know enough about the present or about the time where Camille is telling the story to really be intrigued about how she got to that point. So it's just there's this kind of discrepancy where I think the book relies too heavily on the reader wanting to know what's going to happen in the future, when that is just not the case. The narrative style, the writing, the characters just weren't enough to carry this book for me, unfortunately. And then we have the kind of highlight of this book, I would say driving factor, if this book has any, this is probably it. That is the relationship between Camille and Sailor. So as I said, Camille is already working in the store. So as I said, Camille is already working at the zoo, and then Sailor kind of comes in, and that's where the book starts off. And it is immediately very clear that they are very different people. Camille is somebody who's very rule-loving. She's a law-abiding citizen. She never does anything out of line. She kind of lives a very unremarkable, quiet existence. She kind of has some people looking down on her, kind of not taking her too seriously. And then Sailor comes into her life, and Sailor is very different. And different to a point where Camille and me wondered how she got that job in the first place and why the hell they don't kick her out. And these characters, they just clash so beautifully, but at the same time, even though they're so different, they just share a deep love and passion for animals. There was this one quote where Camille, who in the beginning especially, she's very excited to be working at the zoo. It's a huge privilege to be in contact with animals at this stage. And she's very happy about it. And then Sailor has kind of more conflicted, more nuanced feelings on the whole thing. And Camille asks Sailor, "Were you sad to leave the zoo?" referring to Paris Zoo. And Sailor says, "I was sad it existed, if that's what you mean." And it's just, they have both such love for animals, but such different feelings about the zoo and the existence of the zoo. And that is really, in my opinion, what was strong. That is the strongest attribute of this book, this kind of inner conflict of the protagonists. That, because especially since we are in Camille's point of view, when Sailor says these things, we really see Camille kind of work through that, because she just has a very conformative view of her workplace. And that was really fun, in my opinion. That is, I think, what this book did best, where it kind of peaked. But unfortunately, the relationship between the two characters was not enough for me to grab me throughout the entirety. I think if this book had been shorter, and 270 pages is not a lot of pages, but I think if it had been like 200 pages long maybe, it could have been a lot more effective, to me personally. I do have to say, I still think this premise is probably one of the best I've read so far this year. The idea of this last zoo on Earth, and kind of the commodification of animals to this degree, and how people are kind of pulled into that underground world around animals that are just there to help the animals, who care about the animals. It is so interesting. The book had good characters, in my opinion. What did it in for me personally was just the poor pacing. And then the last thing I want to add, just because I think the synopsis, like the official synopsis, hints at this maybe even more than I did in this video. This book is not queer. I went into it expecting it to be queer. It is not. It is maybe queer in the way that, like, I don't know, in the way that Swan Queen is queer, right? And if you're thinking, wow, Maria, it just sounds like a pretty bad queerbait. Yeah, I think that's what this is. Because there are hints throughout the book that maybe something might happen between them, but it never actually does. And I was just like, it's 2025. You're talking about the fact that people have rats as pets now, and they're like the richest, most exclusive people in the world. And that they suck. And you're talking about like all of these horrific things, but you can't say that two girls kissed. Like, that's weird. It just feels like there should have been a romantic entanglement there. And even more importantly, there was no reason in the story why there wasn't. You know what I mean? Like, they clearly express affection for each other. Neither of them is really serious about any men in their lives, or ever referred to ever having been serious with a man before. And it's just like, why am I reading a queer bait in 2025? yeah, that's my professional opinion. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you've read this book, or let me know if you want to pick it up after this review. And I will see you all in the next one.